Hello everyone, and welcome back to Fluent English Journey. My name is Ava, and I'm really happy you're here with me today. If you are new to this channel, welcome. This space is created to help you improve your English every single day through calm listening practice, real-life situations, and natural English stories. You don't need to rush. Just relax, listen carefully, and let the language come to you naturally. Today, we are going to explore different life situations. These stories will help you understand advanced English in context, but in a simple and comfortable way. Each story carries a lesson, not only for your English, but also for life. So get comfortable, take a deep breath, and let's begin. Let's start with a story about an unexpected challenge at work. A few years ago, I worked with a man named Daniel. He was a project manager at a technology company. One morning, Daniel received sudden news that one of his key team members had resigned. This happened at the worst possible time. The project deadline was only 2 weeks away, and everything felt unstable. Many people would panic in this situation. But Daniel didn't panic. Instead, he calmly gathered his team together. He looked at everyone and said, "We can handle this. Let's reorganize our tasks and work smart." Daniel stayed late at the office. He helped his team rewrite reports, checked details carefully, and encouraged everyone to stay focused and positive. His calm attitude gave the team confidence. In the end, they completed the project on time. Not only that, but the client was very satisfied and praised their work. This story reminds us that good leadership and teamwork can solve problems that first seem impossible. Now let's move to another situation, dealing with misunderstandings. A woman named Maria once shared her experience at an international conference. She was giving a presentation to professionals from many different countries. During her talk, one listener suddenly interrupted her and strongly disagreed with her ideas. The room became quiet and tense. Everyone was watching closely. Instead of reacting emotionally, Maria paused for a moment. She smiled and said calmly, "Thank you for sharing your perspective. Let's discuss this point further." By responding this way, she turned a possible conflict into a respectful and professional discussion. Later, the same person told Maria that he truly respected her calm and confident attitude. This story shows us that communication is not only about the words we use, but also about emotional intelligence and self-control. Next, let's talk about adapting to change. Henry was a teacher from London who moved to another country with his wife and 2 children. When he started teaching there, he quickly realized that everything was different. The teaching methods were new, the culture felt unfamiliar, and the language barrier made things difficult. At first, Henry struggled. Some students even laughed at his accent, which made him feel uncomfortable. But Henry didn't give up. Instead, he decided to learn more about the local culture. He observed his students carefully and slowly adjusted his teaching style. He introduced new activities, encouraged student participation, and showed genuine care for his classroom. After a few months, his students respected him deeply. Eventually, Henry became one of the most respected teachers in the school. His story teaches us that patience, openness, and adaptability are keys to success in new environments. Now, let's move to a story that tests honesty and integrity. David worked at a logistics company. One day, while checking his payment details, he noticed an accounting mistake. It looked like he had received a bonus that he didn't earn. The amount of money was large, and no one else seemed to notice the error. David thought about it all night. He knew he could stay silent, but it didn't feel right. The next morning, he walked into his boss's office and explained everything honestly. His boss was surprised and said, "Thank you for your honesty." Most people would have stayed quiet. Later, that same honesty earned David a promotion. This story reminds us that integrity may not always bring quick rewards, but it always builds long-term trust and respect. Now, let's talk about kindness during difficult moments. Emma was a nurse in a small town. During a health crisis, she worked long and exhausting night shifts. One evening, she noticed a patient sitting alone. He looked nervous and afraid because he had an upcoming surgery. Instead of rushing through her duties, Emma sat beside him and gently said, "You're not alone. Everything will be fine." Those simple words changed the man's mood completely. He smiled, felt calmer, and thanked her sincerely. That small moment of compassion gave him hope. This story shows us that even small acts of kindness can have a powerful impact. Next, let's explore a story about learning from failure. Robert was a small business owner who opened a bakery. He invested all his savings, but at first, the business failed. Sales were low and customers rarely returned. Many people told him to give up. But Robert chose a different path. He asked his customers for honest feedback. They told him that his bread was too dry and his shop didn't feel welcoming. Instead of feeling offended, Robert listened carefully. He improved his recipes and redesigned the shop to feel warm and friendly. Within 1 year, the bakery became one of the most popular places in town. This story teaches us that failure, when treated as a teacher, can lead to success. Now, let's talk about balancing work and family life. Laura was an engineer and a mother of 2 children. She loved her job, but she also wanted to be present for her family. At one point, she felt completely exhausted and overwhelmed. So she made a decision. She created a schedule that protected her family time while still supporting her career goals. She woke up earlier, prepared meals in advance, and kept weekends reserved for her family. Slowly, her stress decreased and her productivity improved. Laura's story shows us that true success is not only about work, but also about harmony and balance in life. Next, let's look at a story about helping others. Michael was a taxi driver. One rainy night, he picked up an elderly man who seemed confused and lost. Instead of rushing the ride, Michael listened patiently. He helped the man find his address and even walked him to his door to make sure he was safe. Later, the man's family called to thank Michael. His small act of kindness made a big difference. Every day gives us opportunities to help others, even in simple ways. Finally, let's talk about persistence. Sophia was a university student who applied for many scholarships. She was rejected again and again. Each rejection hurt, and she felt discouraged. But she refused to quit. She improved her essays, asked professors for guidance, and continued applying. Over time, her hard work paid off. Sophia's story reminds us that persistence, patience, and belief in ourselves can open doors that once seemed closed. On her 5th attempt, Sophia finally received a full scholarship to study abroad. When she opened the email and read the good news, she couldn't hold back her tears. She cried with joy, relief, and pride. All the hard work, all the rejections, and all the moments of doubt suddenly made sense. Her story reminds us that persistence, even when hope feels weak, can lead to life-changing results. Now, let's talk about learning to stay calm under pressure. Ethan was a firefighter who once faced a very dangerous situation during a building rescue. Thick smoke filled the air, alarms were ringing, and people were panicking everywhere. Fear was all around. But Ethan stayed calm. He spoke clearly, gave simple instructions, and guided everyone step by step out of the building. Later, when someone asked him how he managed to stay focused in such a scary moment, he replied, "When you panic, you lose control. When you stay calm, you find solutions." This mindset is useful not only in emergencies, but also in everyday life. At work, at home, or in relationships, calmness helps us think clearly and act wisely. All these different situations, from honesty to persistence, from kindness to calmness, help us understand how English is used naturally in real life. They also remind us that language is not only about grammar or vocabulary. It is about expressing values, emotions, and human experiences that make communication meaningful. A few months ago, I met a man named Thomas. He was a software developer, always full of energy and curiosity. He told me about a time when he worked on a very complex project. His company wanted to build an online education app, but the deadline was extremely short. The team was small, and every day felt like a race against time. Instead of feeling hopeless, Thomas used the challenge as a chance to grow. He said, "Every evening I stayed 1 extra hour. Not to overwork, but to learn something new that could help me the next day." By the end of the project, the team succeeded. More importantly, Thomas discovered how much he loved solving difficult problems. Sometimes, challenges are not walls that stop us. They are doors that lead us to new skills. Another story comes from Isabella, a farmer who runs a small family business. One season, heavy rain destroyed most of her crops. Many farmers around her gave up for that year. But Isabella refused to surrender. She started reading about new farming methods, planted vegetables that could survive wet soil, and worked from sunrise to sunset with her husband and 2 sons. Months later, her farm recovered and produced even more vegetables than before. She said that experience taught her something important. The worst days can prepare us for the best ones. Her resilience turned failure into strength. Now, let's look at the importance of empathy in communication. Stephen was a manager at a busy call center. One day, he noticed that one of his employees, Linda, had become quiet and distracted. Instead of criticizing her performance, Stephen invited her for a short walk outside. He gently asked, "Is everything okay?" Linda shared that her mother was in the hospital and she was struggling emotionally. Stephen allowed her flexible hours and temporary work from home. A few weeks later, Linda returned with renewed energy and deep gratitude. Stephen later said, "Leadership is not about control. It's about care." Empathy builds trust faster than authority ever can. Now, let's talk about patience and long-term goals. Aaron was a university professor who dreamed of writing a book on environmental science. Every night after work, he wrote a little, sometimes only 1 paragraph. Years passed. He researched, edited, and rewrote again and again. Many people questioned him and said, "Why spend so much time on something uncertain?" But Aaron believed meaningful work takes time. After 7 years, he finally published his book, and it became widely respected in his field. He said, "Patience isn't waiting for success. It's working steadily even when you can't see results yet." His story reminds us that slow progress is still progress. Here's another powerful moment. Sarah was a baker who ran a small shop in her hometown. One morning, a customer complained loudly that her cake was too dry. Everyone in the shop turned to look. Instead of reacting defensively, Sarah stayed calm and said, "Thank you for your feedback. Let me fix that for you." She prepared a new cake and offered it with a kind smile. Over time, that same customer became one of her most loyal supporters. Sarah later said, "Kindness is free, but its value is priceless." Now, let's move to making decisions under uncertainty. Jonathan was a financial advisor with a stable job, a wife, and 2 children. He dreamed of starting his own consulting business, but the risk felt heavy. After careful planning, saving money for 6 months, and many sleepless nights, he finally took the leap. At first, business was slow, and doubt filled his mind. But through persistence, learning, and building relationships, his business grew. Years later, he said it was the best decision of his life. This teaches us that courage does not mean the absence of fear. It means moving forward despite fear. Finally, let's hear about Emily. Emily was a nurse working in an emergency department. One night, during a power outage, she had to help deliver a baby using only a flashlight. The situation was intense and frightening, but she stayed calm, trusted her training, and focused on each step. Everything ended safely. Later, she said, "That night taught me that preparation and calmness can turn fear into focus." Her story shows us that even in extreme moments, our mindset can make all the difference. Now, let's shift to a story about forgiveness. Mark was a small business owner who once lent money to a close friend. The friend promised to return it, but he never did. Days turned into months, and months turned into years. Mark carried anger and disappointment in his heart for a long time. That feeling slowly affected his peace of mind. One day, Mark realized something important. Holding on to anger was hurting only him, not the other person. So he made a decision. He chose to forgive and let go. Later, Mark said, "Forgiveness doesn't excuse what happened, but it frees you from being trapped by it." His words remind us that emotional peace often begins when we choose to release heavy feelings from our hearts. Another inspiring example comes from Hannah, a school principal who wanted to improve her students' reading habits. Instead of forcing them to read textbooks all the time, she tried a new idea. She introduced Reading Fridays. Every Friday for 30 minutes, everyone in the school, students and teachers, read something they truly enjoyed. There were no exams and no pressure. Soon, students began sharing stories, recommending books, and even writing their own short stories. Within 1 year, reading scores improved greatly. More importantly, students started to love reading. Hannah's creative thinking turned learning into a joyful habit. Her story shows that real change often begins with one simple idea, repeated consistently. Next, let's hear about David and Clara. They were a married couple who started a small clothing business. At the beginning, they had very few customers and no experience in marketing. Life was difficult. Every evening, after putting their children to bed, they worked together. They designed new patterns, learned online promotion, and packed orders by hand. It was slow, tiring work. But slowly, people noticed their quality and sincerity. Their business grew step by step. They often said, "We didn't build this through luck. We built it through love, effort, and faith." Their story reminds us that success built with integrity lasts much longer than shortcuts. Here's another powerful story about persistence. Noah was a medical student who failed an important exam, not once, but twice. He felt broken and ashamed. Many people expected him to quit. But Noah chose a different path. Instead of memorizing answers, he focused on understanding concepts deeply. He discussed topics with classmates, asked professors for feedback, and changed his study habits. The next year, Noah passed the exam with one of the highest scores in his class. Later, he said, "Failure didn't stop me. It shaped me into a better learner." This shows us that mistakes are not the end. They're often the beginning of deeper growth. Now, let's talk about helping strangers. Rachel was a mother of 3. One day, while driving on a quiet road, she saw a man struggling to fix his broken car. She stopped, called a mechanic for him, and waited until help arrived. Later, the man sent her a thank you letter. He wrote that her kindness came at a time when he had lost faith in people. Rachel said, "We often underestimate how powerful small acts of kindness can be." Her simple action made someone's difficult day much brighter. Another inspiring journey comes from Victor. Victor was a construction worker who dreamed of becoming an architect. Many people told him it was impossible because he didn't have a university degree. But Victor refused to believe that. He studied online courses at night, saved money carefully, and worked hard every day. Eventually, he was accepted into an architecture program. Years later, he designed buildings that now stand proudly in his city. His story shows that hard work and self-belief can break almost any barrier. Now, let's explore communication between generations. Olivia was a young woman who found it difficult to connect with her father after she got married and moved away. They spoke less and misunderstandings grew over time. One day, Olivia decided to call him and speak honestly. They talked for hours, sharing memories, feelings, and unspoken thoughts. That call changed everything. After that, they spoke regularly again. Olivia later said, "Silence creates distance, but communication builds bridges." Her story teaches us that it's never too late to rebuild relationships. Next, let's learn about humility. Patrick was a successful lawyer who once lost a case he was sure he would win. At first, he felt angry and blamed others. But later, he realized he had ignored small but important details. Instead of hiding his mistake, he told his team, "I was wrong." Let's learn from this. That honesty made his colleagues respect him even more. Patrick said, "Real confidence isn't pretending to be perfect. It's admitting when you're not." Humility turned his failure into wisdom. Now, let's move to a classroom story. Nora was a teacher who had a student named Leo. He constantly interrupted the class and caused trouble. Instead of punishing him, Nora tried to understand him. She discovered that Leo was struggling at home and used humor to hide his sadness. Nora gave him small responsibilities, like helping with materials and leading group discussions. Slowly, Leo changed. Nora said, "Sometimes what looks like bad behavior is really a request for attention and care." That insight helped her become a better teacher. Next, let's hear from William, a photographer. When William started, his photos were blurry and dull. He often compared himself to professionals and felt discouraged. But he didn't quit. He practiced every day. He studied lighting, angles, and composition. Years later, one of his photographs was published in a national magazine. William said, "Perfection doesn't come from talent alone. It comes from consistent practice." His journey proves that improvement comes from patience and persistence. Finally, let's talk about building community. Sophia and James were a married couple who moved to a new city for work. They felt lonely and didn't know anyone. Instead of staying isolated, they started organizing small community dinners. Neighbors came, shared food, talked, and laughed together. Slowly, friendships grew, and the new city began to feel like home. Their story reminds us that connection begins when someone takes the first step. Sophia once said that connection begins when someone decides to open a door. By taking the first step, she and James brought people together and showed that kindness can build community anywhere in the world. Their story reminds us that we don't need a big plan to create connection. Sometimes, we just need a warm heart and a small action. Another powerful moment comes from Elijah, a firefighter who once rescued a family during a severe flood. The water was rising fast, and the situation was extremely dangerous. Later, when someone asked him what motivated him, he simply said, "In moments of danger, I don't think about myself. I think about who needs help." That level of bravery is something we can all learn from. We may not face floods or fires every day, but courage also appears in small moments, helping a coworker, listening to someone who is struggling, or standing up for what is right. True courage lives in both big and small actions. Now, let's finish this part with Clara. Clara opened a small bookstore in her neighborhood. For many months, almost no one came in. She barely sold any books, but she refused to close the doors. She believed deeply that people still loved reading. To bring people together, Clara started hosting storytelling evenings. She invited parents and children to sit, listen, and share stories. Slowly, people began to return. The bookstore became a warm and welcoming place. Clara later said, "If you build something with love, it will eventually find its audience." Her story reminds us that hope, consistency, and kindness never go out of style. A few years ago, I met Evelyn, a language teacher with a big dream. She wanted to open her own learning center. She didn't have much money, but she had a clear vision. She wanted to create a friendly and supportive space where people of all ages could learn English comfortably. At first, she started with only 3 students in her living room. She taught with passion, using simple methods and real-life conversations. People loved her style. Soon, students began recommending her to others. Within 1 year, her small class grew into a full learning center with more than 100 students. Evelyn said, "It's not about starting big. It's about starting with heart." Her journey shows how belief and consistency can turn small beginnings into something meaningful. Now, let's talk about Nathan. Nathan was a man in his 40s who worked as a factory technician for over 15 years. One day, he realized that his job no longer challenged him. Deep inside, he always wanted to study engineering, but he felt it was too late. His wife encouraged him to try evening classes. Life became difficult. He worked during the day and studied at night. Many times, he felt exhausted and wanted to quit. But he didn't. For years later, Nathan graduated and became an engineer at the same company where he once worked as a technician. His story teaches us that it's never too late to learn something new. Next, let's hear about Lucy. Lucy was a social worker who spent her days helping families in need. One afternoon, she met a young boy who refused to go to school because he was being bullied. Instead of giving him advice or a lecture, Lucy sat with him and listened carefully. She discovered that the boy loved drawing. Lucy gave him art materials and asked him to create a poster about courage. When he finished, she hung the poster in the school hallway. That small action made the boy feel seen and valued. Slowly, he returned to school with confidence. Lucy's compassion shows how understanding others can change lives in simple yet powerful ways. Another story comes from Paul, a delivery driver. During a harsh winter, heavy snow covered the roads. Many drivers refused to work, but Paul knew that some people depended on those deliveries for important supplies. Carefully and patiently, he continued driving through dangerous conditions. He later said, "I don't do it for money. I do it because someone needs it." His sense of duty turned an ordinary job into a meaningful mission. Sometimes, simple dedication becomes true service. Now, let's move to finding balance in life. Naomi was a successful businesswoman who worked more than 12 hours a day. She was proud of her achievements, but her family often ate dinner without her. Her children were asleep before she came home. One day, her young daughter left a note on her desk. It said, "Mom, I miss you." That moment changed everything. Naomi restructured her business, delegated tasks, and chose to spend her evenings with her family. Later, she said, "True success is not measured by money, but by moments shared with the people we love." Her story reminds us to value balance, not only ambition. Now, let's talk about Samuel. Samuel was a farmer who faced drought for 2 long years. Many people in his village sold their land and left. But Samuel stayed. He researched water-saving methods, collected rainwater, and planted crops that needed less water. People doubted him, but he continued patiently. The next year, his farm produced healthy crops again. When others saw his success, they followed his example. Samuel said, "Sometimes being patient when everyone else gives up is what leads to success." His resilience turned him into a leader and a symbol of hope. Another touching story comes from Olive, a nurse working in a rural hospital. One night, she cared for a patient who spoke a different language. Communication was difficult, and the patient felt afraid. Olive remembered a few basic words she had learned from a friend and used them to comfort him. The patient smiled and relaxed, realizing she was trying to connect. Olive later said, "Even a few words of kindness can cross any language barrier." Her story shows how empathy can overcome differences. Now, let's move to a lesson about confidence. Jason was a young architect presenting his first major design to a group of investors. He felt nervous. During the presentation, one investor criticized his idea strongly. For a moment, Jason froze. Then he took a deep breath and said calmly, "Thank you for your feedback. May I explain why I chose this design?" He spoke clearly and confidently, explaining his ideas step by step. By the end, even the same investor praised his professionalism. Jason later said, "Confidence doesn't mean never being afraid. It means not letting fear control you." Finally, let's hear about Grace. Grace loved cooking, but she never thought it could become her career. After losing her office job, she started cooking homemade meals for her neighbors. They loved her food and began recommending her to others. Soon, Grace opened a small kitchen service that provided meals for schools and offices. Looking back, she said, "Losing my job felt like failure, but it was actually a new beginning." Her story reminds us that sometimes life closes one door so that a better one can open. Her story teaches us that sometimes what feels like an ending is actually the beginning of something better. Now, let's talk about teamwork. Liam, a firefighter, once shared how his team rescued people trapped inside a tall building. Thick smoke filled the space, and visibility was very low. The situation was dangerous, but each firefighter trusted the others completely. They communicated using short, clear instructions and supported one another without hesitation. After the rescue, Liam said, "A team is not just a group of people. It's a group of hearts beating for the same goal." His story highlights the importance of cooperation, communication, and trust, especially during difficult moments. Next, let's move to Claudia. Claudia was a teacher who faced a serious challenge when her school moved to online learning. Many of her students had poor internet access and could not attend virtual classes regularly. Instead of giving up, Claudia found another way. She printed her lessons and personally delivered them to her students' homes every week. Parents and students deeply appreciated her effort. Later, the school recognized her dedication with an award. Claudia said, "Teaching is not just about lessons. It's about never giving up on your students." Her determination proved that true education continues even in difficult conditions. Now, let's talk about Eric. Eric was a carpenter who made furniture for local families. One day, a family asked him to build a dining table using wood from an old tree that had been in their yard for generations. The tree held deep emotional value for them. Eric worked carefully and patiently, preserving the natural marks of the wood. When the family saw the finished table, they cried. They said it felt like a piece of their history had returned home. Eric later said, "Work becomes art when it holds meaning." His story reminds us that dedication and respect for others' emotions can turn ordinary work into something truly special. Another inspiring moment comes from Tanya. Tanya struggled with public speaking for many years. Whenever she stood in front of people, her hands would shake and her voice would tremble. One day, her boss asked her to give a short presentation about a new project. She felt afraid, but she decided to prepare carefully. Every day, she practiced in front of her husband until she felt stronger. On the day of the presentation, her speech was clear, confident, and engaging. Afterward, people congratulated her warmly. Tanya said, "I used to be afraid of speaking. Now, I'm afraid of not sharing my ideas. Her journey shows that confidence is built through small, consistent steps. Now, let's move to Marcus. Marcus was a driver who worked long hours transporting goods. One afternoon, while driving, he witnessed a serious car accident. Without hesitation, he stopped his vehicle, called emergency services, and helped the injured people until help arrived. Later, the police thanked him for his bravery. Marcus simply said, "I just did what anyone should do." His story reminds us that kindness and courage are not about recognition. They're about doing the right thing at the right moment. Another powerful example comes from Anna. Anna was a mother of two who decided to continue her education after spending 10 years raising her children. Going back to school was not easy. She attended classes, studied late at night, and often felt tired and overwhelmed. But she kept reminding herself of her dream to become a teacher. When she finally graduated, her children stood up, clapped, and shouted, "Mom, you did it." Anna said, "I wanted my children to see that dreams don't have an age limit." Her dedication became a lesson not only for herself, but also for her family. Now, let's hear about Robert. Robert worked as a hotel receptionist. He noticed that many guests arrived tired and stressed after long journeys. So he decided to change the way he welcomed them. He greeted guests warmly, offered tea, and made an effort to remember their names. Over time, many guests asked to stay at the same hotel again because they felt comfortable and cared for. One day, his manager asked him what his secret was. Robert smiled and said, "People don't always remember what you say, but they remember how you make them feel." His simple kindness turned his workplace into a place of comfort. Finally, let's explore Leah's story. Leah volunteered at a local shelter for homeless families. Every week, she organized cooking sessions where people learned to prepare simple meals. One day, a man told her that her lessons helped him start a small food stall. That stall now supports his family. Leah said, "Helping others doesn't always need money. Sometimes it just needs time and heart." Her story reminds us that everyone can make a difference, even through small actions. Some years ago, I met Helen. Helen worked as a tailor in a small town. She started learning the skill at the age of 16 by watching her mother sew. Over time, she became known for her careful work and attention to detail. One day, a customer brought her an old wedding dress that belonged to his grandmother. The fabric was fragile, torn, and very delicate. Many tailors refused to repair it. Helen spent days carefully fixing every stitch with patience and love. When she returned the dress, the man cried and said, "You brought my family's memory back to life." Helen later said, "Every stitch carries emotion." Her story teaches us that real skill always includes heart and dedication. Now, let's hear about Tom. Tom was a security guard at a shopping mall. One evening, he found a small child crying near the entrance. Instead of panicking, Tom knelt down and gently asked, "What's your name?" The boy said he couldn't find his parents. Tom held his hand, gave him some water, and calmly walked around the mall until they found the child's family. The parents were extremely grateful. Tom later said, "I didn't do anything special. I just did what I hoped someone would do for my own child." His story shows how calm actions and simple kindness can make a big difference. Let's finish with Rachel. Rachel started a small community garden on an empty piece of land behind her house. At first, people thought it was a waste of time. But Rachel invited children and elderly neighbors to join her. Together, they planted vegetables, flowers, and trees. Slowly, the space became green and full of life. Neighbors gathered there to talk, laugh, and share food. Rachel said, "We didn't just grow plants. We grew friendship." Her project turned a lonely neighborhood into a connected and caring community. Let's talk about Ben, a young doctor working in a very busy city hospital. In his first year, he once made a small mistake in a patient's report. Thankfully, no one was harmed, but the experience stayed in his mind for a long time. Ben later said, "I felt like I had failed." Instead of hiding the mistake, he chose honesty. He told his supervisor everything. The supervisor appreciated his courage and helped him learn from it. After that moment, Ben became more careful in his work and kinder toward younger doctors. He learned an important lesson. Real responsibility means accepting mistakes and turning them into learning moments. Now let's move to Aisha, a strong woman who lost her small shop during an economic crisis. Life became very difficult for her and her family. For months, she searched for a new path but found nothing. One day, she noticed that people in her town were interested in natural products, especially handmade soap. She decided to try something new. Using local herbs and simple oils, she started making soap at home. Slowly, people began to like her products because they were affordable and natural. Aisha said, "When one door closes, another opens, but only if we are brave enough to look." Her creativity and patience helped her rebuild her life step by step. Next, let's talk about Peter, a bus driver who worked for more than 20 years. Every morning, he greeted his passengers with a warm smile and a cheerful "good morning." At first, most people stayed quiet and ignored him. But after a few weeks, something changed. Passengers began smiling back. Some even started greeting him first. One day, a woman said, "Your smile makes my mornings easier." Peter replied, "If a smile can brighten someone's day, then it is worth everything." His simple habit turned an ordinary job into a daily source of happiness. Now we meet Sophia, a scientist with big ideas about renewable energy. At the beginning of her career, many research organizations rejected her work. They said her ideas were too ambitious and unrealistic. Sophia felt disappointed, but she did not give up. She continued working in a small home lab with the support of her husband. She collected data, improved her research, and stayed focused on her purpose. One day, she published a paper that gained international recognition. Sophia said, "When no one believes in you, believe in your purpose." Her story teaches us that persistence can turn rejection into success. Let's move on to Daniel, a firefighter who shared a powerful experience from his job. During one rescue mission, he had to enter a burning apartment to save an elderly woman. The heat was extreme, and he could barely see anything. But he listened carefully and followed the sound of her voice. He guided her safely outside. After the rescue, the woman said, "You didn't just save my life. You gave me hope." Daniel later said that compassion gives him the strength to keep going. His courage shows that true strength comes from caring for others. Now let's talk about Lily, a school librarian who wanted children to love reading. She noticed that most students only open books when teachers forced them. Lily decided to change this. She started organizing story hours where she read aloud and invited students to act out scenes from the stories. Slowly, children began to enjoy reading. They started borrowing books on their own. Lily said, "When learning becomes fun, curiosity grows naturally." Her creativity turned reading from a duty into a joy. Another inspiring story comes from Omar, a taxi driver who loved talking with his passengers. One day, he picked up a young man who looked very sad. Omar gently asked, "Are you okay, my friend?" The young man shared that he had failed an important university exam and felt hopeless. Omar told him about his own struggles and how hard work had changed his life. 1 year later, the same passenger met Omar again and said proudly, "I passed because of your words." Omar smiled and said, "Sometimes a short conversation can change a life." His story reminds us that encouragement can travel far. Now we meet Eva, who worked in a care home for elderly people. One resident, Mr. Howard, rarely spoke and avoided activities. Eva noticed that he always carried an old photo of his late wife. One day, she gently asked him about it. He began sharing memories of their life together. Slowly, he started talking more and joining others. Eva said, "Listening is a form of love." Her patience helped a lonely man feel connected again. Let's talk about Lucas, an athlete who trained for years to run a marathon. On race day, everything went well until he injured his ankle halfway through. Many runners stopped, but Lucas kept going. He walked, step by step, until he reached the finish line hours later. The crowd cheered loudly. Lucas said, "Finishing slow is still finishing." His journey shows that success is not always about winning, but about never giving up. Another meaningful story comes from Caroline, a quiet student who loved science but felt shy in class. Her teacher, Mr. Green, noticed her potential and encouraged her to speak up. Slowly, Caroline gained confidence. She began asking questions and sharing ideas. Later, she represented her school in a national science competition and won second place. Caroline said, "Someone believed in me before I believed in myself." Her story shows how powerful encouragement can be. Now let's talk about Mohammed, a shop owner known for his kindness. One day, a customer accidentally broke a shelf in his store. The man apologized nervously, expecting anger. Instead, Muhammad smiled and said, "It's okay. Things can be replaced. People cannot." The customer was deeply touched and later returned with many new customers. Muhammad said, "Kindness always comes back." His calm response turned an accident into a lasting relationship. Next, we meet Sophie, a nurse who loved helping others but forgot to care for herself. She worked long hours without rest, and her health slowly declined. One day, her husband reminded her, "You can't pour from an empty cup." Sophie realized that self-care is not selfish. It is necessary. After resting more, eating well, and taking short walks, she returned to work feeling stronger. She said, "Caring for myself helped me care better for others." Her story teaches us the importance of balance. Finally, let's hear about Hassan, a construction worker who saved money for many years to build a small home for his family. When the house was finished, he didn't celebrate alone. Instead, he invited his neighbors and shared food with everyone. He said, "Home means more when it is shared." His humility brought people closer together and turned his neighborhood into a friendly community. His story reminds us that generosity always brings people together and creates a strong sense of community. Now let's hear about Elena, a volunteer teacher who worked in a remote village. Every day, she traveled for almost 2 hours to reach children who had never been to school before. At the beginning, the children were very shy and quiet. They were afraid to speak or ask questions. Elena never rushed them. She patiently taught them the alphabet, simple sounds, and basic English words. Day by day, the children grew more confident. After 1 year, they were able to read small books on their own. Elena said, "The most beautiful reward is watching someone learn something new." Her patience and dedication opened the door to a brighter future for those children. Next, let's turn to Jacob, a fisherman who lived near the coast. One morning, a powerful storm hit the area and destroyed many boats, including his own. Many people felt hopeless. But instead of feeling angry or sad, Jacob chose to help others first. He repaired broken nets and helped his neighbors rebuild their boats. When someone asked why he didn't focus on his own boat, Jacob replied, "If I help others sail, I will not be alone at sea." Later, when the time came, the community helped him rebuild his boat. His story shows that kindness always returns in unexpected ways. Now let's talk about Nora, a writer who spent many years doubting herself. She wrote poems quietly and kept them hidden in a notebook. She believed her words were not good enough. One day, her husband found her poems and told her they were beautiful and meaningful. With his encouragement, Nora shared her poems online. Slowly, people from different countries began reading them and sending kind messages. Nora said, "I spent years hiding something that could have helped someone else." Her story reminds us that sharing our talents can bring comfort and hope to others. Finally, let's talk about Adam, a teacher who started a simple but powerful project. He asked his students to write letters to elderly people living in nursing homes. Many seniors said they had not received a letter in years. The project grew quickly, and soon students from other schools joined. Adam said, "Words have the power to connect generations." What began as a writing exercise became a bridge of kindness and human connection. Some years ago, I met Angela, a chef who worked in a small restaurant by the river. She was not famous, but everyone in the neighborhood loved her food. She once told me that she had never studied at a cooking school. She learned to cook by preparing meals for her younger brothers while her parents worked late. She said, "When you cook with care, people can taste your love." One day, her restaurant caught fire and she lost everything. Many people thought she would give up, but her customers came together and helped her rebuild. 2 months later, she reopened her restaurant with a small sign that read, "Back with flavor and faith." Her story reminds us that when we give from the heart, the world often gives back. Another inspiring story comes from Michael, a taxi driver who dreamed of becoming an artist. Every night after long shifts, he painted city streets, bridges, and faces filled with life. For years, no one noticed his work. One day, a passenger left a business card behind. It belonged to an art gallery owner. Later, the man called Michael and said, "Your paintings tell stories people need to see." That one ride changed his life. Michael's art was displayed in a local gallery. He said, "It all started with believing my art mattered, even when no one else did." His story reminds us that dreams can grow quietly if we stay faithful to them. Now let's talk about Isabella, a young woman who worked at a busy airport. Her job was to guide passengers to their gates. She noticed that many elderly travelers felt confused or nervous. So she began walking them personally to their gates, talking with them along the way. Isabella said, "Sometimes people just need to feel seen." One day, an elderly woman hugged her and said, "You made my trip less lonely." Her kindness inspired airport management to create a friendly travel program for senior passengers. Another beautiful story is about Jonas, a university student who volunteered to teach computer skills to older adults. Many of his students were afraid to even touch a keyboard. Jonas was patient and calm. He explained everything slowly and celebrated every small success. One woman cried when she sent her first email to her grandchildren. Jonas said, "Teaching someone something new is like opening a door they didn't know existed." His story shows that sharing knowledge is a powerful form of kindness. Finally, let's talk about Nadia, who worked as a bus cleaner. Every day, she saw people rushing, stressed, and silent. Wanting to spread a little hope, she began leaving small notes on empty seats. The notes said things like, "You are stronger than you think," and "Today matters." At first, passengers didn't know who wrote them. But soon, many began looking for those notes. One day, someone left a reply that said, "Your words helped me survive a hard week." Nadia smiled and said, "I just wanted people to feel hope before they reached their stop." Her small effort created quiet happiness for hundreds of strangers, reminding us that even unseen kindness has power. Now let's talk about Leo, a photographer who once lost his sight temporarily because of an illness. For several months, he could not work and his future felt uncertain. He felt lost and afraid. But instead of giving up, Leo decided to listen more carefully to the world around him. He listened to the wind moving through trees, children laughing, footsteps on the street, and voices passing by. He began recording these sounds and called it his sound diary. When his vision finally returned, Leo created a photo exhibition inspired by the sounds he had collected. His photographs were deep, emotional, and full of life. Leo said, "Losing my sight helped me see the world differently." His story shows that challenges can open new doors to creativity and understanding. Another touching story is about Grace, a single mother raising 2 children. She worked 2 jobs every day to support her family, yet she never missed her children's school events. No matter how tired she was, she always showed up. One day her son asked, "Mom, how do you stay so strong?" She smiled and said, "Because I have reasons to keep going." Years later, that son became a teacher. He told his students, "My mother taught me that strength doesn't mean never being tired. It means showing up anyway." Grace's story reminds us that real courage often lives in everyday care and quiet sacrifice. Now let's talk about Raj, a man who moved to another country with almost no money. His first job was cleaning offices at night. One evening, he noticed that the office manager always stayed late and looked very stressed. Raj began leaving small notes on her desk with kind words like, "You're doing great," and "Please remember to rest." After a few weeks, the manager discovered who was writing the notes. Instead of being angry, she smiled and said, "You've made my nights brighter." Later, when a better job opened in the company, she encouraged Raj to apply. He got the promotion. Raj said that kindness returned to him in the most unexpected way. His journey shows how good actions often build invisible bridges toward success. Next, there's Hannah, a language teacher who started a culture exchange club at her school. Every Friday, students from different countries shared food, songs, and stories from their cultures. One day, a student from Japan shared how lonely she felt before joining the club. Hannah said, "We don't have to speak the same language to connect. Respect and curiosity are universal." The club became a safe space where students learned about the world and built real friendships. Then we meet Ethan, a man who once lived on the streets. One cold winter evening, a local cafe owner gave him a free meal. Ethan thanked her and returned the next day asking if he could clean tables in exchange for food. The owner agreed. Slowly, Ethan saved enough money to rent a small room. Years later, he opened his own cafe and named it Second Chance. On the wall, he wrote, "One meal can change a life." His story reminds us that a single act of kindness can become the turning point of someone's future. Another meaningful story comes from Maya, a nurse working in a children's hospital. One young patient was terrified of injections and refused treatment. Maya began telling him short stories about superheroes who were brave enough to face needles to save others. Slowly, the boy gained courage and said, "I want to be brave too." Maya later said, "Stories can heal more than medicine." Her gentle care helped children replace fear with strength. Now let's talk about Samuel, a man who owned a small bookstore. In a world full of online shopping, his store was often empty. Instead of closing it, Samuel turned it into a community reading space. He added comfortable chairs, free tea, and a shelf called Books That Changed Me, where visitors could leave notes. People began visiting not just to buy books, but to share feelings and stories. Samuel said, "These stories aren't just printed. They're lived." His idea saved his bookstore and gave people a quiet place to belong. Next is Tara, a tour guide in a historic city. She noticed that tourists often forgot dates and facts. So she began telling stories about the people behind the places, artists, workers, and dreamers. Her tours became popular because they felt personal and alive. One visitor said, "You don't just show us the city. You make us feel it." Tara said, "Facts tell what happened. Stories tell why it mattered." Her love for storytelling turned history into something unforgettable. Now let's hear about Noah, a bicycle repairman. One day, a little girl came to his shop crying because her bicycle was broken. She said it was her only way to get to school. Noah repaired it for free and told her that education was a good reason to ride. Years later, the girl returned as a college graduate and brought Noah a new bicycle as a gift. She said, "You helped me reach my future." Noah smiled and said, "That was the best repair I ever did." His kindness returned to him in a beautiful way. Finally, let's talk about Ella, a singer who used to perform in small cafes. One night, during a performance, she forgot the lyrics and felt embarrassed. She stopped, took a deep breath, and smiled at the audience. Then she said honestly, "I'm nervous, but I love being here." The audience clapped and encouraged her. She continued singing, stronger than before. Ella later said, "That moment taught me that being real connects more than being perfect." Her experience reminds us that honesty and courage can turn mistakes into meaningful moments. She laughed and began humming the melody instead. Slowly, the audience joined her, singing together. The moment became warm and unforgettable. Later, Ella said, "I realized that mistakes don't break moments. They make them human." That experience helped her grow, not only as a performer, but also as a person. Today, she teaches young singers and tells them to accept imperfection as part of learning and growth. Next, let's meet James, a bus driver who carried a small radio with him on his daily route. He played cheerful music and sometimes sang along while driving. Passengers started calling his bus the Happy Ride. One day, a passenger who was going through a very difficult time said, "Your singing helped me smile again." James smiled and said, "Music keeps my wheels turning." His simple joy spread to others and turned an ordinary job into a daily act of positivity. Now let's talk about Clara, a student who struggled with math. Numbers confused her, and she often felt discouraged. Her teacher noticed that Clara loved drawing, so he suggested she turn math problems into pictures and diagrams. Slowly, math began to make sense. Years later, Clara became a graphic designer. She said, "Math gave me structure and art gave me meaning." Her story reminds us that learning is not one size fits all. Finding your own way can make difficult things possible. Next is David, a mountain guide who once helped a lost hiker during a dangerous storm. The hiker was scared and panicking, but David stayed calm and said, "Fear makes the mountain look taller. Keep walking." After many hours of climbing through rain and fog, they finally reached safety. Later, the hiker wrote David a letter saying, "You didn't just guide me down the mountain. You guided me out of fear." David said, "Every climb teaches patience and trust." His story shows that true strength is quiet and steady, built step by step. There was also a young man named Liam who dreamed of becoming a teacher. He grew up in a small village where schools lacked books and electricity. Every evening, he studied by candlelight using old notes shared by relatives. Many people told him, "Teaching doesn't pay well. Choose another dream." But Liam believed that a teacher could change hundreds of lives. Years later, he completed his studies and returned to his village to open a small learning center. At first, only a few children came. Soon, parents noticed their children's excitement, and the class grew. Liam said, "I wanted to be the teacher I never had." His story shows that passion can bring light even to the darkest places. Another example of strength comes from Aisha, a doctor who volunteered in a remote area during a flood. Roads were closed, supplies were limited, and conditions were extremely hard. Still, She refused to leave the people behind. She worked day and night treating patients with whatever medicine she could find. One night, when the electricity was gone, she used her phone's flashlight to perform a small medical procedure. When someone asked why she didn't rest, she said, "If I stop, who will help them?" Her dedication showed what true service looks like. Now let's talk about Omar, a baker who loved his work but faced a painful loss when a fire destroyed his bakery. Sitting outside his burned shop, he felt broken. Then a child came and said, "Your bread always made my mornings happy. Please bake again." Those words gave Omar new strength. He began baking small cakes from his home kitchen. Slowly, customers returned. When he finally reopened his bakery, he named it Hope's Oven. Omar said, "Sometimes we have to start small to rise again." His story reminds us that giving up is never the answer. There is also Sarah, a police officer who always tried to see the human side of people. One night, she caught a young man stealing food. Instead of arresting him immediately, she asked why he did it. He said he had lost his job and hadn't eaten in 2 days. Sarah bought him food and helped him apply for work. Months later, the man returned to thank her. He said, "You treated me like a human, not a criminal." Sarah replied, "Sometimes people don't need punishment. They need a chance." Her story shows how compassion can walk hand in hand with justice. Another touching story comes from Nathan, a firefighter who once rescued a small cat from a burning building. Some people laughed and asked, "Why risk your life for a cat?" Nathan simply said, "Every life matters." Later, the cat's elderly owner visited the fire station with tears in her eyes and said, "You saved my only family." That moment reminded everyone that kindness is not measured by size. Small rescues can mean everything to someone. Next, let's hear about Dina, a woman who started her own cleaning company after losing her office job. She had very little money, but she had determination. At first, people looked down on her work. Still, she believed there was no shame in honest labor. She worked carefully, treated clients with respect, and kept everything clean. Within 2 years, her business grew, and she hired other women who needed jobs. Dina said, "I started with a mop and a dream." Her journey shows that dignity comes from doing your best, no matter the work. Now, let's talk about Lucas, a man who struggled with fear of public speaking. Whenever he had to present at work, his voice shook. One day, his manager told him, "You have great ideas. Don't let fear silence them." Lucas joined a small speaking club and practiced regularly. His first speech was shaky, but people clapped. Slowly, his confidence grew. A year later, he spoke confidently in front of hundreds of people. Lucas said, "Confidence isn't something you're born with. It's something you build, one word at a time." His story shows that courage grows through action. Finally, let's begin the story of Priya, a young engineer who joined a company where she was the only woman in her department. At first, her ideas were ignored, and she felt invisible. But instead of giving up or becoming angry, she focused on learning, improving her skills, and speaking clearly when it mattered. Over time, her work spoke for itself, and people began to listen. She decided to prove herself through results, not arguments. She stayed focused, worked hard, and designed a new system that saved the company thousands of dollars. Slowly, people began to notice her effort and intelligence. After that, her team respected her deeply. She later said, "When you face doubt, let your work speak louder than words." Her story shows how quiet strength and patience can change minds without conflict. There is also David, a farmer who faced many years of drought. His crops failed again and again, and his savings slowly disappeared. Many farmers around him gave up and left their land, but David refused to surrender. He began studying new ways to grow food using less water. He experimented, failed, learned, and tried again. After 3 long seasons, he finally succeeded. Then he taught other farmers what he had learned. David said, "The land rewards patience." His story proves that persistence, even in the hardest times, can bring hope to entire communities. Now let's meet Fodima, a woman who loved reading but could not afford books when she was young. She borrowed books from neighbors and read by the window late at night. As an adult, she decided to give others what she once lacked. She started a small library in her neighborhood using donated books and called it the Reading Corner. Every afternoon, children came and sat on old mats while she read stories to them. Fodima said, "Books helped me dream when life felt small." Her passion created a space where imagination and hope could grow. Next is Raphael, a man who repaired mobile phones. One day, an old man came to shop with a broken phone. Raphael noticed that the phone contained precious family photos, so he fixed it for free. The old man said, "These pictures are all I have left of my wife." Weeks later, the man returned with a thank you note and a small box of cookies. Raphael smiled and said, "Kindness doesn't always come back as money. Sometimes it comes back as peace." His story reminds us that true happiness often comes from helping others without expecting anything in return. Another inspiring person is Emily, a farmer's wife who began growing vegetables in her backyard during a difficult time. What started as a small garden soon became a small business when she sold fresh produce to her neighbors. Later, she taught other women how to start home gardens. Emily said, "When you share what you know, everyone grows." Her story shows that even small skills can create big change. Then there is Jonah, a bus conductor who greeted passengers with a smile every single day. He always said simple words like, "Good morning. I hope your day goes well." At first, people didn't respond. But slowly, regular passengers began smiling back. One day, a woman told him, "Your smile made my bad day better." Jonah said, "Happiness is free. I just share it." His positive attitude made every journey brighter. Now let's talk about Layla, who opened a small sewing workshop in her town. She taught widows and single mothers how to sew clothes so they could earn a living. One of her students later opened her own tailor shop. Layla said, "When we lift each other, we all rise." Her project grew into a strong network of women supporting women. Her leadership shows how empowerment begins with sharing opportunities. Next is Alex, a man who worked as a janitor at a university. He noticed that students often threw away notebooks that still had many empty pages. Alex began collecting those notebooks, binding them again, and giving them to children in poor schools. When a student shared his story online, donations poured in. Alex said, "Small things can still make a big difference." His creativity turned waste into hope for learning. There is also Nora, who once failed an important exam. She cried for days, believing her future was over. But her teacher gently said, "Failure is just a delay, not the end." Nora studied again, changed her learning methods, and passed the exam the next time with top marks. Years later, she became a motivational speaker. She said, "I failed once, but it taught me how to rise." Her story reminds us that mistakes are often lessons in disguise. Another touching story comes from Paul, a construction worker. One day, while repairing a wall, he noticed a small bird trying to build a nest nearby. Every time the bird flew away, it returned again and again. Watching the bird inspired Paul to continue a long project he almost quit. He later told his coworkers, "If a small bird can stay determined, so can we." Inspiration sometimes comes from the simplest moments. Now let's meet Sophia, who started a food sharing initiative in her neighborhood. Families who cooked extra food placed it in a community fridge for anyone in need. Sophia said, "No one should sleep hungry when others have enough." Over time, the idea spread to nearby towns. What began as a small action became a chain of kindness connecting hundreds of families. Finally, there is Ben, a retired soldier who spent his free time repairing old bicycles for children. He believed that a moving bike meant a happy child. One day, he saw a boy riding one of those bikes to school, waving with joy. Ben smiled and said, "That is my reward." His story shows that giving time and skills can be one of the greatest gifts. And there was Irene, a woman who ran a small grocery store in her neighborhood. She opened her shop before sunrise every day and greeted everyone with kindness. She often gave fruit or bread to people who could not pay. One morning, a young boy came with a few coins and asked for rice. Irene gave him a full bag and said, "Pay me when you can." Years later, the boy returned as a successful man. He donated new shelves and a bright sign that read, "Irene's Store of Hope." Irene said, "Kindness never expires. It just comes back at the right time." Another inspiring story comes from Jacob, a mechanic who truly loved fixing cars. One cold winter morning, he noticed a woman standing beside the road with a broken vehicle. She looked very worried because she had an important meeting to attend. Without thinking twice, Jacob stopped his van, opened the engine, and repaired the car right there in the freezing weather. When the woman tried to pay him, Jacob gently smiled and said, "It's okay. Just help someone else someday." A few weeks later, the same woman returned to his shop. This time, she didn't bring money. She brought a new signboard for his garage. It read, "Honest Hands Auto Repair." She said, "Your kindness fixed more than my car." Jacob understood then that honest work and a kind heart can take you far in life. Now let's meet Amina, a teacher who worked in a small desert village. Her classroom had no desks, no electricity, and sometimes not even chalk. Still, her students loved her lessons. She used stories and real-life examples to teach science, math, and English. When people asked why she didn't move to a better school, she replied, "These children need hope more than comfort." One year, one of her students won a national scholarship. At the award ceremony, the student said, "I am here because my teacher believed I could be more." Amina smiled quietly and said, "That is the best reward a teacher can ever receive." Next, there is Elias, a farmer who lived near a river. One year, heavy rain destroyed all his crops. Instead of giving up, Elias began planting trees to prevent future flooding. His neighbors laughed and thought it was a waste of time. But Elias continued planting trees year after year. After 10 years, the land became fertile again, and the whole community could farm successfully. When people thanked him, Elias said, "I just wanted to give life back to the soil." His story shows that real change often begins with one person's quiet persistence. Now let's talk about Hannah, a young nurse working in a rural hospital. She traveled long distances to care for patients in small villages. One stormy night, she helped deliver a baby when no other help was available. The mother later named the baby after Hannah and said, "You brought both life and light to this place." Years later, that baby grew up and became a nurse too. When asked why, she said, "Because of the woman who helped me enter this world." Hannah's dedication created a circle of care that continued long after her shift ended. Another meaningful story is about Thomas, a carpenter who made furniture for a living. One day, an old man came to his shop and asked for a chair for his wife, who could no longer walk. Thomas decided to build a special chair with wheels so she could move around freely. When the man saw it, tears filled his eyes. He said, "This is more than a chair. It is freedom." Thomas replied, "Sometimes helping someone move forward means building something with love." Now we meet Nora, a volunteer who helped children in orphanages. She didn't have much money, but she gave her time. Every weekend, she played games, taught drawing, and listened to the children's stories. One child once asked, "Why do you visit us every week?" Nora smiled and said, "Because everyone deserves to feel cared for." As the years passed, some of those children grew up and returned as volunteers themselves. Nora said, "Love multiplies when it is shared." Her story proves that kindness does not need to be big. It just needs to be real. Let's talk about Adrian, a man who repaired shoes on the side of a busy street. He wasn't rich, but he was honest and proud of his work. One day, a businesswoman left her shoes and forgot her wallet. When she returned the next day, Adrian said, "You already paid yesterday." She was surprised because she hadn't. Later, she told others about his honesty. Soon, his small shoe stand became well known. People came not only for shoe repairs, but also for trust. Adrian's story shows that integrity creates its own success. There was also Isla, a social worker who visited families living in very difficult conditions. She listened carefully to their problems and helped them find jobs or education. One family told her, "You gave us more than help. You gave us hope." Isla said, "Hope is the seed that grows into change." She continued her work for many years, inspiring others to care deeply for their communities. Now let's meet Oscar, a security guard at a school. He noticed that many students felt nervous before exams. Every morning, he greeted them with kind words like, "You're going to do great today." Slowly, it became a tradition. Students began looking for him every morning. When Oscar retired, the school held a small celebration. One student said, "You were our first smile every morning." Oscar replied, "I just wanted them to start their day believing in themselves." Another powerful story comes from Amara, a woman passionate about clean water. When her village faced water shortages, she worked with her neighbors to dig a well. It was hard work, but she said, "When you want change, start with your hands." Today, that well provides clean water for hundreds of families. Amara said, "We didn't wait for help. We became the help." Finally, there is Caleb, a delivery driver with a kind heart. One evening, while delivering a package, he saw a little girl crying outside her home. She had lost her pet bird. Caleb stayed with her and searched for over an hour until they found the bird resting on a tree. When the girl's mother thanked him, Caleb said, "I just didn't want her to go to bed sad." Sometimes, small acts done with care stay in people's hearts forever. They may seem simple at the moment, but their impact can last a lifetime. Now let's meet Mira, a woman who worked as a translator for tourists. She loved languages and enjoyed helping visitors understand the local culture. One afternoon, she met an elderly couple who had lost their passports. They were confused and scared. Mira stayed with them for hours, helping them contact the embassy and understand what to do next. When everything was finally solved, the couple said, "You turned our stressful day into a memory of kindness." Mira smiled and said, "When you help others, you create stories worth remembering." Her patience and empathy showed that knowledge becomes truly powerful when it is used to serve others. Next, there is John, a farmer who used to throw away vegetables that did not look perfect. One day, a friend told him about families who could not afford fresh food. That conversation changed his thinking. John started donating the imperfect vegetables instead of wasting them. Soon, other farmers joined him, and together they created a weekly food donation program. John said, "Even imperfect things can still feed people." His idea reduced waste and filled many empty plates, proving that value is not about appearance. Now we meet Sophia, a librarian who believed that a library should feel like home. During winter, she noticed that some children came to the library just to stay warm. Instead of asking them to leave, she created a small reading club where children could read, learn, and eat simple snacks. She said, "Books feed the mind, but kindness feeds the heart." Over time, the library became a safe place where children could grow, dream, and learn without fear. Another inspiring person is Hassan, a taxi driver who loved telling stories to his passengers. One day, a young student told him she was very nervous about her exams. Hassan shared his own story. He explained how he failed his driving test 3 times before finally passing. He said, "Failing doesn't mean you are not good enough. It means you are learning." Later, the student passed her exams and returned to thank him. She said, "Your story gave me courage." Hassan replied, "Sometimes a small story can change someone's journey." There is also Nadia, a woman who opened a small tailoring school in her town. She trained young people for free, especially those who could not afford college. She believed skills could open doors. When one of her students later opened a fashion store, Nadia said proudly, "Success feels better when it spreads." Her generosity created new opportunities for many families to live with dignity. Now let's talk about Ethan, a man who loved running marathons. During one race, he noticed an older runner struggling near the finish line. Instead of running ahead to improve his own time, Ethan slowed down. He placed his hand on the man's shoulder and said, "Let's cross it together." They finished the race side by side as the crowd cheered. Later, Ethan said, "Winning alone feels good, but finishing together feels better." His action showed that support is more important than speed. Finally, there is Clara, a woman who grew flowers in her backyard. She often took those flowers to hospitals and gave them to patients and nurses. She would say, "Flowers can't heal the body, but they can heal the heart." Over time, people began calling her garden the Garden of Smiles. Her simple habit brought comfort, color, and hope to many difficult days. When someone once asked why she gave her flowers away for free, she smiled and said, "Because happiness grows when you share it." Her kindness bloomed quietly in the hearts of everyone she met. It showed that even the smallest gestures can bring light to the darkest days. Now let's talk about a young man named Leo. Leo dreamed of becoming a musician, but his small town had no music schools. During the day, he worked in a cafe, serving customers and cleaning tables. At night, he practiced his guitar, sitting quietly in his room and playing again and again. One evening, he played a song for an elderly customer at the cafe. The man listened carefully and then said, "You should share this gift with others." Those words stayed with Leo. Soon, Leo began playing music in the park. People stopped to listen. Children came with homemade instruments made from cans and boxes. Slowly, the park turned into a small concert place filled with laughter, rhythm, and joy. Years later, Leo opened a free music class for children. He said, "Music taught me that dreams sound louder when they are shared." His story reminds us that passion becomes stronger when it lifts others. Next, there is Maria, a woman who worked in a bakery. Every morning, she woke up before sunrise to bake fresh bread for her neighborhood. One cold morning, a homeless man came to the bakery and asked if there were any leftovers. Maria gave him a fresh loaf of bread and a cup of hot tea. The next day, he returned, not to ask for food, but to offer help. He cleaned the bakery and helped carry supplies. Soon, they began giving free breakfast to people in need. Maria said, "A loaf of bread can fill a stomach, but kindness can fill a soul." Her simple act of giving turned into a shared effort that brought warmth and hope to many lives. Then there is Daniel, a firefighter who loved his job, not only for saving lives, but for comforting people during their hardest moments. One evening, during a rescue, he found a frightened little boy hiding under a table. Daniel carried him outside safely and gently placed his fire helmet on the boy's head. He said, "You're brave too." That boy never forgot those words. Years later, he became a firefighter himself. When asked why, he said, "Because one man showed me what courage looks like." Daniel never knew his kindness would inspire a future hero. Finally, let's meet Elena, a young woman who loved painting murals. She believed art could bring life to gray, forgotten walls in her city. She started painting colorful pictures with messages like "Hope lives here and you matter." At first, people only watched. But slowly, children, adults, and even elderly neighbors joined her. They painted together, laughed together, and shared stories. The once empty walls became bright symbols of unity and pride. Elena said, "Art is not just about colors. It's about connection." Her work turned silent streets into places filled with meaning and belonging.